Chapter 8 of Book 3 of Les Miserables, Volume 3, by Victor Hugo. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Bruce Peary. Les Miserables, Volume 3, by Victor Hugo, translated by Isabel Florence Hapgood. Book 3, The Grandfather and the Grandson. Chapter 8. Marble against granite. It was hither that Marius had come on the first occasion of his absenting himself from Paris. It was hither that he had come every time that M. Gillenormand had said, "He's sleeping out." Lieutenant Théodule was absolutely put out of countenance by this unexpected encounter with a sepulchre. He experienced a singular and disagreeable sensation which he was incapable of analyzing, and which was composed of respect for the tomb mingled with respect for the colonel. He retreated, leaving Marius alone in the cemetery, and there was discipline in this retreat. Death appeared to him with large epaulets, and he almost made the military salute to him. Not knowing what to write to his aunt, he decided not to write at all, and it is probable that nothing would have resulted from the discovery made by Théodule as to the love affairs of Marius, if, by one of those mysterious arrangements which are so frequent in chance, the scene at Vernon had not had an almost immediate countershock at Paris. Marius returned from Vernon on the third day, in the middle of the morning, descended at his grandfather's door, and, wearied by the 2 nights spent in the diligence, and feeling the need of repairing his loss of sleep by an hour at the swimming school, he mounted rapidly to his chamber, took merely time enough to throw off his travelling coat and the black ribbon which he wore round his neck, and went off to the bath. M. Gillenormand, who had risen betimes like all old men in good health, had heard his entrance, and had made haste to climb, as quickly as his old legs permitted, the stairs to the upper story where Marius lived, in order to embrace him and to question him while so doing, and to find out where he had been. But the youth had taken less time to descend than the old man had to ascend, and when Father Gillenormand entered the attic, Marius was no longer there. The bed had not been disturbed, and on the bed lay, outspread but not defiantly, the greatcoat and the black ribbon. "I like this better," said M. Gillenormand. And a moment later he made his entrance into the salon, where Mademoiselle Gillenormand was already seated, busily embroidering her cartwheels. The entrance was a triumphant one. M. Gillenormand held in one hand the greatcoat, and in the other the neck ribbon, and exclaimed: "Victory! We are about to penetrate the mystery. We are going to learn the most minute details. We are going to lay our finger on the debaucheries of our sly friend. Here we have the romance itself. I have the portrait." In fact, a case of black shagreen, resembling a medallion portrait, was suspended from the ribbon. The old man took this case and gazed at it for some time without opening it, with that air of enjoyment, rapture, and wrath, with which a poor hungry fellow beholds an admirable dinner, which is not for him, pass under his very nose. "For this evidently is a portrait. I know all about such things. That is worn tenderly on the heart. How stupid they are! Some abominable fright that will make us shudder, probably. Young men have such bad taste nowadays." "Let us see, father," said the old spinster. The case opened by the pressure of a spring. They found in it nothing but a carefully folded paper. "From the same to the same," said M. Gillenormand, bursting with laughter. "I know what it is, a billet doux." "Ah, let us read it," said the aunt, and she put on her spectacles. They unfolded the paper, and read as follows: "For my son, the Emperor made me a baron on the battlefield of Waterloo. Since the Restoration disputes my right to this title, which I purchased with my blood, my son shall take it and bear it. That he will be worthy of it is a matter of course." The feelings of father and daughter cannot be described. They felt chilled, as by the breath of a death's head. They did not exchange a word. Only M. Gillenormand said in a low voice, and as though speaking to himself, "It is the slasher's handwriting." The aunt examined the paper, turned it about in all directions, then put it back in its case. At the same moment a little oblong packet, enveloped in blue paper, fell from one of the pockets of the greatcoat. Mademoiselle Gillenormand picked it up and unfolded the blue paper. It contained Marius' 100 cards. She handed one of them to M. Gillenormand, who read, "Le Baron Marius Pontmercy." The old man rang the bell. Nicolette came. M. Gillenormand took the ribbon, the case, and the coat, flung them all on the floor in the middle of the room, and said, "Carry those duds away." A full hour passed in the most profound silence. The old man and the old spinster had seated themselves with their backs to each other, and were thinking, each on his own account, the same things in all probability. At the expiration of this hour, Aunt Gillenormand said, "A pretty state of things." A few moments later, Marius made his appearance. He entered. Even before he had crossed the threshold, he saw his grandfather holding one of his own cards in his hand, and on catching sight of him, the latter exclaimed with his air of bourgeois and grinning superiority, which was something crushing, "Well, well, 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 so you are a baron now. I present you my compliments. What is the meaning of this?" Marius reddened slightly and replied, "It means that I am the son of my father." M. Gillenormand ceased to laugh, and said harshly, "I am your father." "My father," retorted Marius, with downcast eyes and a severe air, "was a humble and heroic man, who served the Republic and France gloriously, who was great in the greatest history that men have ever made, who lived in the bivouac for a quarter of a century, beneath grape shot and bullets, in snow and mud by day, beneath rain at night, who captured 2 flags, who received 20 wounds, who died forgotten and abandoned, and who never committed but one mistake, which was to love too fondly 2 ingrates, his country and myself." This was more than M. Gillenormand could bear to hear. At the word "republic," he rose, or, to speak more correctly, he sprang to his feet. Every word that Marius had just uttered produced on the visage of the old royalist the effect of the puffs of air from a forge upon a blazing brand. From a dull hue he had turned red, from red, purple, and from purple, flame-colored. "Marius!" he cried, "abominable child! I do not know what your father was. I do not wish to know. I know nothing about that, and I do not know him. But what I do know is that there never was anything but scoundrels among those men. They were all rascals, assassins, redcaps, thieves. I say all. I say all. I know not one. I say all. Do you hear me, Marius? See here, you are no more a baron than my slipper is. They were all bandits in the service of Robespierre. All who served Buonaparte were brigands. They were all traitors who betrayed their legitimate king. All cowards who flew before the Prussians and the English at Waterloo. That is what I do know. Whether monsieur your father comes in that category, I do not know. I am sorry for it, so much the worse, your humble servant." In his turn, it was Marius who was the firebrand, and M. Gillenormand who was the bellows. Marius quivered in every limb. He did not know what would happen next. His brain was on fire. He was the priest who beholds all his sacred wafers cast to the winds, the faker who beholds a passer-by spit upon his idol. It could not be that such things had been uttered in his presence. What was he to do? His father had just been trampled underfoot and stamped upon in his presence. But by whom? By his grandfather. How was he to avenge the one without outraging the other? It was impossible for him to insult his grandfather, and it was equally impossible for him to leave his father unavenged. On the one hand was a sacred grave, on the other hoary locks. He stood there for several moments, staggering as though intoxicated, with all this whirlwind dashing through his head. Then he raised his eyes, gazed fixedly at his grandfather, and cried in a voice of thunder, "Down with the Bourbons and that great hog of a Louis XVIII." Louis XVIII had been dead for 4 years, but it was all the same to him. The old man, who had been crimson, turned whiter than his hair. He wheeled round towards a bust of M. le Duc de Berry which stood on the chimney-piece, and made a profound bow, with a sort of peculiar majesty. Then he paced twice, slowly and in silence, from the fireplace to the window, and from the window to the fireplace, traversing the whole length of the room, and making the polished floor